you take away from the 14th of July debate?
Almost 50% of the airtime in the 3.25 hours or whatever it was that debate lasted were people saying how fantastic the army are, how great the army are, how wonderful the army are, we all support our veterans, and blah, 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 blah. And then for me, there were some very, very strong arguments made about why the current circumstances need to change. Because we're so supportive of the army, they need to change. It's all wrong. But for the incumbent administration, I hate to be political here, but for the incumbent administration, or the people that were speaking on behalf of the administration, the current government, it was, we're totally supportive of our army and blah, 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 blah. However, status quo. Things have to continue. The debate never got to the nub of why. Then that's the thing that was broadly absent, and that's the thing that we need to be promoting. Why then does it need to continue? We don't need to be promoting why it needs to continue, we need to be investigating why it needs to continue. And I'll cut to the quick on it. For me, it's because we need to be seen to be virtuous. Yeah, this is all about virtue signalling. It's about virtue signalling politics. And that in itself is a misappreciation of where priority lies in the context of leadership. Because leadership isn't to be virtuous. Leadership is to do the things that are right. And where we are in our argument is we're articulating why it is right to bring an end to those persecutive process of investigation and inquiry.
A few people were upset in the debate and outside the debate about the comment of well, you're just naive people that don't understand the law.
I mean, the lady that made the suggestion says that, no, you need to check Hansard. That isn't what I said, but I did check Hansard and it is what she said. So probably not what she intended. That wasn't the intent in what she was saying. Not quite sure what her intent was, but it's insulting to suggest that people like us are naive. We were involved in the troubles in Northern Ireland for decades, collectively and individually for years. I think perhaps the suggestion was that we're naive to the finite detail of the law that is an issue here, and I would, I'd accept that. None of us are lawyers. I'm an academic, but law isn't my arena of academia. So maybe we don't have perfect knowledge here. But what should happen is that the people that do have perfect knowledge should be jumping all over this. And if nothing else, the perfect people that do have perfect knowledge should be pointing us to why it is then that we are naive. And nobody's saying that, are they? Nobody's saying you're wrong for the following reasons. There was one exception to that in that debate, and that is, well, you're wrong because if we continue with the Northern Ireland Legacy Act, which affords broadly, it's not exactly, but it broadly affords amnesty to soldiers and it affords amnesty to paramilitaries, terrorists. It was, we should never afford such protections to terrorists. We should never do that. We should never do that. But the Crown has already done that, and it's done it substantively. I mean, profoundly in the context of the Good Friday Agreement. We released more than 400 people that were serving prison sentences, some of them for the most heinous crimes. I mean, I'll just give two examples. Would be the two guys that were in the black taxi with the two young boys on the Andersonstown Road in Belfast as they were being driven to meet their fate on a piece of wasteland outside the GAA club, a working man's drinking club, close to St Agnes Church in Andersonstown. Two members of the IRA were in the back of that black taxi with box cutters trying to cut these guys' eyes out. Now those guys got very, very long custodial sentences because they were found guilty of participating in the murder of these boys. They were released under the Good Friday Act. They're both free as a bird. And there are many similar examples to that. So we have already afforded substantive amnesties and letters of comfort allowing members of the IRA that are on the run, that may be subject to inquiry and investigation and potential prosecution. Those letters of comfort are effectively letters of amnesty. So that argument pushing back at us doesn't hold any sway whatsoever, because if you were to apply the same logic under the Good Friday Agreement, all soldiers that were involved in anything should no longer be investigated. And in fact, any soldiers that might be serving for anything that they did should be released from jail now, no matter what it is, for any crimes that they committed during their service in Northern Ireland. Because that's what happened to the paramilitaries, that's what happened to the IRA and indeed the UDA, etc.
I struggle with this notion of amnesty for people that have been investigated, have been cleared, and then imposing inquiries with no new evidence.
Yeah, so our men that are under the microscope in Northern Ireland at the moment, there is no new evidence, and there's certainly no new compelling evidence that's being presented here. They have all been subject to processes of inquiry before. Not all of them ended up in the coroner's courts. There was an SAS incident, probably the biggest one was at Loch Gall, that did end up in a coroner's court. The recent one where there has been a coroner's inquest for Clonaux, there was never an inquest conducted at the time for the Clonaux deaths. However, all of these incidents were subject to what was accepted both legally, politically, as being the proper process of diligence to be undergone, and they were all analysed. At every single incident, you have a police forensic scene of crimes team that turns up, and they do their forensic analysis and they bag and tag evidence, all goes onto the archive, and ultimately a decision is made as to whether anything should be referred to Crown prosecution or indeed a coroner's court. All of those processes were adhered to. There's never any exception. This isn't the question of the SAS going out applying lethal force and then just going back to their base and having a few beers and then up for a couple of medals at the palace later on. There's that proper process. So then having to come back 25 or 30 years later and once again go through the process, and these processes indeed, it's not the only time that people have been through this, because there have been other inquiries that have happened between those incidents and the inquiries that we're seeing today. So they've given evidence there. The punishment isn't so much what might happen at the end of any of these. The punishment is the process itself. These are old men. And I've heard some commentators very glibly say, yeah, but it'll all go to court and there won't be enough evidence and they'll just be found not guilty. Yeah, but meanwhile, it's been a 30-year process. You can't tell me that's not a punishment that hasn't sat like the angel of death hanging over the shoulder of these guys. Maybe an unfortunate analogy, the sword of Damocles. That's used the sword of Damocles over their shoulders, over their heads, over this whole period of time. I know for a fact that it's destroyed marriages. It's driven people down into the demon drink, and a couple of people have even committed suicide because of the pressure. So it's unjust. It's meant to be a process of transitional justice. It's actually transitional injustice for one party to the conflict. All known as a conflict. You have the Crown on the one side, the paramilitaries on the other. Paramilitaries all free to run. These guys still subject to, it's unjust. It just is, by any definition.